Since 2020, something invisible has been quietly reshaping medicine, research, and millions of lives. Many people felt the effects long before medicine had clear explanations. Persistent fatigue, brain fog, symptoms that did not follow the patterns doctors expected. Researchers and clinicians began investigating these patterns more closely. Again and again, one biological factor appeared at the center of the conversation: the spike protein. Since COVID, the spike protein has become a household term. Yet fundamental questions remain. Where does it come from? How long can it remain inside the body? And can it be removed? Research now links spike protein to several potential consequences: cellular senescence, microscopic amyloid microclots that disrupt circulation, and gut damage that can weaken the immune system. Tonight, two experts step forward to unpack the science behind these discoveries. Dr. Gayln Perry, pulmonologist and co-lead of GoldCare's long COVID and vaccine injury program, brings clinical insight from treating patients with complex post-COVID conditions. Chante Senatre, Chief Scientific Officer of Vedicinals USA, brings expertise in genetics and nutrigenomics, with a focus on spike protein disruption. Together, they examine a biological puzzle that continues to unfold: how spike protein may move through the body, how long it may remain, and what researchers are only beginning to understand about its effects. The pandemic changed the world in ways everyone could see. What it may have changed inside the human body is only now coming into focus.
Good evening and welcome to GoldCare Medical Town Hall. Joining us tonight is Dr. Gayln Perry. She is a pulmonary specialist focused on complex inflammatory and post-viral conditions. Her work centers around respiratory and vascular consequences of spike protein exposure, helping patients navigate persistent symptoms through targeted testing, root cause evaluation, and personalized recovery strategies. Also with us is Chante Senatre. She brings a background in genetics and expertise in nutrigenomics. Chante has a research-driven perspective to spike protein disruptor and cellular repair. Her work explores mechanisms of persistence, microclot formation, and innovative strategies to support detoxification, vascular health, and whole body healing. Carl Clift is here to join in on the conversation too. Tonight is a critical conversation about the science behind spike protein exposure and why its potential long-term effects have such harm that they can do to you. We'll examine how spike protein enters the body, why it may persist, and what research reveals about inflammation, its damage, and microclots. You'll hear about what GoldCare is doing to fight the spike protein issues in America too. Matter of fact, you can see Dr. Gayln Perry on GoldCare's platform for our long COVID and vaccine injury appointment. GoldCare is proud to offer Vedicinals supplements as part of this protocol, and you can find them on the GoldCare store. Getting started is simple. Visit us at the link scrolling across your screen. It's goldcare.com/drgold for 30 days on us. All right, Dr. Perry, let's get started.
Thank you, Drew. I wanted to start by saying that I don't work for Vedicinals. I'm in private practice, but I have been aware of the research team and scientists behind this product for probably 3.5 years. I was introduced to them through some scientific lectures that I was able to hear. I've heard probably 4 or 5 scientific lectures. What I was impressed about was the international breadth of the brilliant scientists and researchers that are coming together to address the concern, the humanitarian concern of the spike protein. So this is not a product by one individual, but by the brilliant minds of multiple people across the globe. And the other thing I was impressed by is that they want to know if the product they are providing is actually working. And they have data to show that. That's impressive. We need that. And lastly, being on live Zoom calls with some of these researchers and individuals, I felt that they had their heart in the right place, that they really understand that we are up against a time clock, that people's health is at risk, and that they are working against that clock, against this crisis. So I wanted to bring this team of individuals and these products to the GoldCare family, and I'm excited to bring them here, and I hope that you will learn a lot. So this is Chante and Carl. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Chante, we're just trying to get these slides up and running here. I'll just try to figure this out right now. It's not showing. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay.
There we go.
So there's a little bit out of order. So what we're going to start with is, how do we become exposed to the spike protein?
So obviously, we have the natural infection, which tends to be pretty devastating. You also have exposure through vaccination. We have found that perpetuates spike protein, and also you're exposed to it through exosomes. So when you're breathing in and out, we have these tiny vesicles called exosomes, and they also carry spike proteins and viral fragments, which can expose us to the whole virus and or just the spike protein itself.
So when we're looking at the spike protein, how does it spread in the body, and how long can it last in the body? We've obviously seen a lot of research in the last 2 or 3 years with a number of different universities. What's the general consensus now?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we were very familiar with Bruce Patterson's work, where it showed that the CD14 and CD16 monocytes were carrying that, well over a year, 187 days. Then as we went through, we found a couple other studies. The most recent study is from Yale, and they're showing that spike persistence can last up to 709 days. So it sticks around for quite a long time.
Gotcha. I'm just going to pop around here. So as we start to get a little bit more involved in the science, what is a senescent cell, and how is this progressing through the body? We all talk about virus infection as such, and the spike being entered the body from an infection or from vaccination, but we're seeing a lot of research that's showing that there's multiple phases that our body will go through that does not necessarily need an infection to have spike protein persistence. So can you walk us through what that looks like?
Sure. So first of all, senescence is a natural cell cycle. So our body goes through cycles where we make new cells, they do their job, they die off. Senescence is what you would call the end stage of that cycle. So it is a natural part of the cell cycle. It's when the senescent cells actually get infected. That's called viral induced senescence. And a lot of viruses do that. It's not just unique to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The senescent cells can have that harbored inside of them. And what happens is as you see on your screen, you can have a senescent cell that's been infected and or harboring spike protein, and they begin to affect their neighboring cells as what we would call bystander cells. As the spike protein is carried through either through exosomes or by itself, it begins to transfect its neighbors. When those neighbors become in a certain tipping point, as you look down like level 3 right there, you have bystander cells that are infected, you have cells that are transfecting each other, and then that begins to affect the next progeny. In other words, you have a self-perpetuating spike protein production, and that is where we hear that spike protein persistence problem. The senescent cells are the main host reservoir places where they can evade the immune system. And from there, they can perpetuate massive amounts of spike proteins without the need for a new infection.
So that is, I think, one of the most important things that we found is that you do not need an infection in order to have persistent spike and all of the downstream effects that persistent spike can have, correct?
Correct, yes. And each infection you get is compounding. Very rarely does anyone completely clear this spike protein and or the viral. It becomes latent. So each infection is compounding on your health.
And when we talk about infection from the natural virus versus vaccination, what are we seeing when we look at those two, given the years that have passed now?
In the beginning, there was so much focus placed upon the vaccine, and it did tremendous amounts of damage. We are still dealing with massive amounts of people that are injured. In the middle of that, I do think that the severity of just the natural infection itself has been minimized. And that, I think, is a large mistake, because we're overlooking that just the natural infection can also get a person to a very unhealthy stage. And they also can have chronic illness, long COVID, and it does not necessarily have to be vaccine related. So it's very important to understand this natural virus is extremely damaging.
Makes sense. So if we were to look at, let's just go to the slides here. If we were to describe this in terms of the direct cell-to-cell transfer, what exactly is happening under the hood here?
Yeah, so we were talking about earlier in transfection. This is a sometimes misunderstood that you have to have this whole virus introducing the spike protein, which is not true. Tunneling nanotubes are a mechanism that viruses have used for quite a long time, and they do that so they can travel cell to cell without getting neutralized by antibodies, without being degraded by macrophages. And it's a way for them to move between cells without the immune system being able to attack it or degrade it. And what we're seeing here is there are many different ways that it can spread throughout the body. So if you have the tunneling nanotubes going cell to cell, that becomes your direct cell to transfer. But in that, from a productive cell, meaning that it's producing spike proteins, you can have that from SARS-CoV-2 virus itself. You can have that from spike in exosomes, which are confirmed to be transferred cell to cell. You can have just the spike protein itself going cell to cell. You can have the double membrane vesicles, which is where this virus hijacks the endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi bodies, and it makes these type of double membrane vesicles that then are transferred cell to cell. And then you also have the RNA in exosomes, which can do an assortment of things on its own. So spreading throughout the body are many different mechanisms outside of just the viral infection.
And we will show at the end of the discussion here a number of testing methods that are used in order to measure these different types of spike fragments as such, and where they are in the body, correct?
Sure. Yes, we'll show that at the end.
Sounds good. Then just to move on to the syncytia formation, again, trying to understand a little bit more about exactly what's going on in the body, and this leads towards the microclot discussion later.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll expand on the microclots later in Dr. Gaylon's section. Here, I wanted to bring attention to the fact that this syncytia formation is also a mechanism of viruses. And what it does is it actually makes the cells fuse to one another. And inside of that fusion, you have conglomerates that are made that the immune system cannot break down these proteins and or the virus. So it becomes a protective reservoir, and this conglomerate can grow and grow and grow. And then the next thing you know, you have a large amount of cells that are no longer functioning. And these also will send out chemokines and cytokines that are extremely damaging, causing inflammation.
So why is it so hard to actually clear the spike protein right now? We've seen 5 years of multiple different protocols, not just supplements, but all kinds of other things as well, with varying successes. So why is it so difficult?
Yeah, so as we just described, senescence is a huge problem. Your syncytial formation is a huge problem. Then you have this persistent intracellular reservoirs that can keep producing the spike proteins. Then you have the unrestricted spike in the circulation that are also causing the damage to the endothelium and also contributing to the microclots. The tissues that become senescent are harboring the spike protein and or virus, and then the microthombri themselves are holding spike proteins and or viral fragments. And what you get is a long COVID progression, and that severity becomes worse over time as the antibody escape takes place.
Makes sense. So I think the takeaway here is that the spike protein itself, because it's constantly being passed along through multiple exposures, unless it's looked at very quickly from an early stage, can continue to thrive as such in the body via multiple mechanisms. And this is where we're now starting to see disease expressions months, if not years, after what would be termed an exposure. That's the idea?
Yes, absolutely. And that's also why, there's some confusion still 6 years later while we have such high antibody titers and not really a viral infection itself. That is all kind of explained in these last few topics that I've explained here.
Now you open the can of worms, so we're just going to ask you real quick the difference between spike antibody tests and spike antigen tests.
Yeah, so the antibody test is more so indirect, look at it. So it's an indirect perspective in how your body has responded to the virus and or spike protein as a toxin, whereas an antigen test is direct. So you need an antibody that has bound to an antigen, and then you get an interface that causes a positivity in testing. So one's indirect and one's direct.
Makes sense. And I think what we've been seeing is folks with very high antibody levels, 25,000 plus via LabCorp, but trying to understand exactly what that means based upon a active infection or spike persistence has been the challenge.
Sure. Yes, because those antibodies can, they could be there from, 2021, they could be there from last year, they could be there from an active infection. So the antibodies themselves are not really helpful in quantifying how much spike protein burden the body is dealing with.
Makes sense. And then we're going to go into the second part of the discussion here, which will cover microclots and understanding a little bit more about microthrombi. So I think that's a good setup. And we'll hand that back to Drew for now.
Thank you so much, Carl and Chante. What an enlightening conversation so far. I cannot believe that you guys are finding, or the science is showing, that the spike protein is staying in the body upwards of 700 days. That's an unreal statistic. I wanted to point out that while we are talking about this, the spike protein, inside the GoldCare platform, there is a amazing content library with a ton of topics that go in depth following this sort of conversation. So all of this educational material ties together so nicely. We've done other town halls on the COVID shop. We've done master classes. Actually, Dr. Perry has taught master classes on the GoldCare platform. We've even done grand rounds for our doctors, even as recent as just a couple weeks ago, where we had Florida's Surgeon General, Dr. Latipo, talking about the COVID-19 vaccine toxicity. So these conversations, like you're hearing tonight from the Vedicinals team, and then everything that we do on the GoldCare platform is just really, really strong and robust. And it's a great reason to come and see us. So check us out, goldcare.com. We'd love to show you what we've got going on. Back to you guys.
Okay, we're just going to upload the new slides here, Gayln. We didn't have the correct slides up, so we'll start with the microclot formation here and just and then I'll walk through the different questions. So the first question really is, can you educate us a little bit about microcirculation, the endothelium, the glycocalyx? What are we actually looking at here with respect to the long COVID effects of microclots from spike persistence?
Yeah, so go to the next slide. Oh, Carl, I guess we're getting it. So microcirculation is basically what you would think. We have arteries and veins, and they become smaller, and then they become the microcirculation, your capillaries. The microcirculation goes everywhere in the body. It's a lattice work of capillaries that takes basically oxygen and nutrients to every cell in the body, and then it allows for the removal of toxins from the body. So it's extremely important for the health of the cells of our body. So in regards to that microcirculation and actually all vessels, it is lined with a single layer of cells called the endothelium. And it aligns the entire cardiovascular system as well as the lymphatic system. And the endothelium is important because it actually it helps transport nutrition into the cells. It transports oxygen in the cells. It also produces nitric oxide, along with the glycocalyx, to vasodilate the vessels. So that's the endothelium. It's the lining of the vessels. On top of the endothelium is something called the glycocalyx. And it is a meshwork of sugar and protein-rich covering that actually protects the endothelium. And it actually looks like baby hairs on the lining of the vessels. And actually what it is a mechanical sensor that is looking for shear forces in the middle of the vessel. Obviously, we want our blood to flow without turbulence or shear forces. And so the glycocalyx with these little hairs is measuring whether or not that's going on. And if it is, it'll send a message to that endothelium, and they will produce the nitric oxide that makes the vessel bigger. So we have less shearing forces. The glycocalyx and the endothelium are, specifically the glycocalyx has a negative charge on that. And it is extremely important because the blood vessels and the platelets also have a negative charge. So they repel one another. Negative charges repel negative charges. What that does is it keeps the red blood cells and the platelets right down the middle of the blood vessel and keeps it flowing nicely. And that'll be important when we talk about the spike protein and the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the lipid nanoparticles, how that positive charge will be disrupted. So if you have damage to the glycocalyx and the endothelium, that actually will allow a prothrombotic environment to occur. A thrombus means clot. So all of us are predisposed to that when we get infected. So we really want a healthy glycocalyx and endothelial lining and negative charges to prevent any type of clotting. And then, of course, we're going to talk about microclots, which is specific to the pathology that we're talking about right now.
Sarah, sounds good. If we could just move to the next slide, Serena. Okay, so we're going to move to slide 10, please. So can you explain the microclots, Dr. Perry? How are they different to these than typical clots? Because what we are seeing in a lot of the literature are these calamari clots versus these microclots. And most of the doctors that, if you go and do a D-dimer test or other tests, they don't understand what a microclot is. And it's a test that comes back negative as such, and they really don't know what to do. So what's the real difference here?
Yeah, so a lot of people are familiar with clots in the calf, right? After we've had a long car ride. So that's a deep vein thrombosis. So that clot obviously is in a big vein. It's visible on imaging like ultrasound or a venogram. And that clot is a natural occurring clot. When the patient has been predisposed, maybe they have a clotting disorder, or maybe they even had knee surgery, which would damage the endothelium and the glycocalyx with the surgery and set up a perfect reason for developing a clot. That clot, though, is something that the body can handle typically on their own, unless obviously it gets really large. Those clots naturally occur by fibrinogen being acted upon by thrombin to produce a fibrin clot. Fibrin is naturally broken down in the body into fibrin degradation products. That's where your D-dimer comes from. So a D-dimer is a measurement of breakdown of clot, fibrinolysis, that you can use to measure the presence of clot and the breakdown of clot. We will talk about the fact that these microclots that we are finding are not like these clots that we're typically familiar with. They're microscopic. They cannot be seen with imaging. They do not break down with normal fibrinolysis, and they do not typically create a robust D-dimer response. So that's kind of a general difference between normal clots.
And we haven't really seen this clotting prior to 2020. So we're pretty darn sure this is the spike protein in its many forms.
We're going to be talking about amyloid clots. You can have tiny baby amyloid clots with patients with diabetes, but not to this degree.
Gotcha. Okay, sounds good. Next slide, please. So if you wanted to explain what exactly is going on in terms of the vascular dysfunction as per this, and then we're going to move on to clinical consequences.
So the uniqueness about these clots that we talked about, they're microclots, but the transition from the fibrinogen to the fibrin is impacted by the spike protein, specifically the S1 unit, subunit of the spike protein. If you literally drop that in blood, you get clotting. That's all you need. But it also induces the fibrinogen to misfold, and you have these structurally abnormal proteins. Now you have a amyloid fibrin clot. It's not a typical fibrin clot, but it has these abnormal folded proteins. The body, for the most part, 80 to 90%, cannot break that down by typical fibrinolysis. In addition, these clots include things that prevent breakdown from happening. So it incorporates other things such as alpha-2 antiplasmin. Antiplasmin blocks plasmin, and that helps with fibrinolysis. The other thing is it's wrapped around a lot of these inflammatory mediators. Something called neutrophil extracellular traps, which is the sticky stuff that comes from neutrophils, It's very inflammatory, damage the glycocalyx and the endothelium, and it makes those clots even more difficult to break down. So these clots are very, very difficult to break down, and they get stuck in our microcirculation. Obviously not good.
Gotcha. I noticed on the slide here, it says neurological and systemic symptoms. So microclots causing neurological problems?
Yeah, so the consequences of these clots, makes sense that if you cannot get blood flow, oxygen, nutrients to your end organs, which one of them would be the brain, then you're not going to be thinking very well, right? You're going to have significant brain fog, cognitive issues, word finding problems, that kind of thing. So you want me to talk about the environment that these clots kind of grow out of?
Gotcha. So if we go to the next slide.
Yeah, we can do that. So, so we've already talked about that the spike protein initiates these abnormal foldings and lead to the amyloid clots. We've talked about the neutrophil extracellular traps that make them sticky. But there's also a part of the SARS-CoV-2 virus in particular creates what's called antimicrobial peptide-like viral fragments. And these are highly inflammatory, but very importantly, they have a positive charge. And that positive charge disrupts the negative charge and impacts the flow of blood on top of everything else that we're talking about. Also, the S1 subunit attacks the ACE2 receptors on all vessels and cause vasoconstriction of the vessels. So not only are the vessels having problems with blood clotting, the vessels are now narrow and constricted and the blood can't flow. Your glycocalyx and your endothelium is inflamed. You don't have nitric oxide. You even have more vasoconstriction. And then, as Chante pointed out, the S1 subunit of the spike protein doesn't go away. So you have this pro-thrombotic spike protein that stays around and just perpetuates this problem.
Gotcha. So let's move on to the next slide. We're going to talk about the mitochondria, and if it affects the mitochondria, we're really in trouble, I think.
Yeah, so it's very important. There's been recent research that has shown that the spike protein directly impairs the mitochondria. And as everybody knows from their high school biology, that this is the, quote, powerhouse of the cell. The mitochondria takes all of our nutrient sources and turns it into ATP, adenine triphosphate, which is where the energy comes that we utilize to do all the things we need to do. The main source, the most efficient source that gives us the most energy is fatty acids. So one molecule of fatty acid can give you 100 ATP. They have finding that the spike protein is inhibiting the mitochondria from utilizing the most important source of energy, which is fatty acids. And we are having to shift over to a different mechanism, which is glycolysis, using glucose, and that is very inefficient. We only get 2 ATPs out of 1 molecule of glucose. So you can see why people are fatigued. And then also that mechanism of producing energy produces lactic acid. So lactic acid is what makes your muscles burn when you exercise. Lactic acid makes you acidic, makes your breathing go up. You get short of breath, even when your heart and your lungs are working normally. And then you add on top of that microclots that do not deliver oxygen and nutrients to the mitochondria, and you have a really bad situation.
Gotcha. So both Dr. Perry and Chante speak with doctors as well as patients all the time. So what are the main symptoms that we're seeing that would be associated with what we've been talking about for the last few minutes?
So some of the things that I'm seeing in my clinic now, I'm a pulmonary and sleep physician, so I get a lot of referrals for, believe it or not, fatigue, non-restorative sleep, brain fog. And as most people know that the long COVID is now the new myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome. So a lot of those people have severe fatigue, post-exertional malaise, brain fog. They have non-restorative sleep. They have autonomic nervous system symptoms. I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing patients having to take disability because they can no longer function at work. I had a young man who had a normal cardiopulmonary workup, extensive, and I sent him in for a cardiopulmonary stress test. he had a very early anaerobic threshold. And I think this is exactly what caused it.
So in that situation, you're able to actually use some standard testing to get a better insight into what was actually happening then.
Yeah, it gave me a big picture. I did a complete workup on him. It was all normal. And then I sent him for the cardiopulmonary stress test, and he met a very early anaerobic threshold for no reason.
Gotcha. Very good. Chante, any others that you've come across in the last few years that stand out?
Basically the same thing she's mentioning. It seems like everyone that I speak to just cannot keep their energy up. They're looking for all types of ways to support the mitochondria. I know that a lot of people have turned to methylene blue. That seems to be a fad that hit for a while. I don't know that it's given them a lot of relief. Now we're seeing the BP157 coming in the peptide arena for mitochondrial damage, but yes, just about every doctor and person I talk to is lack of energy and mitochondrial damages from this viral infection.
So we would expect in the next few years to see a lot of research into exactly this subject matter, because it's the building blocks or the foundation of the entire cell structures, right? So
absolutely. And as she was saying, once the lactic acid builds up and you get an acidic body, that's the environment where you can start getting cancers to grow. It's not a favorable condition for the body to operate with mitochondria in its alternative energy form.
Makes sense. We've got a couple extra minutes here before we go to break. Are there any other comments, Dr. Perry, that you'd like to on this subject matter?
Yeah, one of the things that kind of caught my eye, this was, maybe a year ago, but in the Journal of American College of Cardiology, there was a case presentation of 3 individuals. They all died from arrhythmias. They all underwent autopsies. They had normal left ventricular ejection fraction and a normal late gadolinium MRI of the heart. And the autopsy showed numerous micro scars of the myocardium. And what was fascinating and tragic was that the micro scars were terminal arterioles that had clots in them. And they measured the distance between the micro scars, and they were exactly lining up with the terminal arterioles. So this myocardium was just covered with these baby micro scars, and it was because the terminal arteriole was full of clot. Mm-hmm. That's what we're finding, and that's been documented in autopsy and published, and that's happening in all the organs.
Oh man.
There is one laboratory that does test microclots in Alabama, MedHelp. Can you let us know, Chante, what does that help us look for?
Yes, so MedHelp in Birmingham, Alabama, that's with Dr. Jordan Vaughn and Dr. Philip Terrientos. And we work closely with them using Vedicinals, and they also do a microclot testing with microfluorescence methods, and they can give you an idea. The scale goes from 0 to 4. It'll give you an idea of how significant your microclots are and an idea of how large they are. But they have had extensive problems and still are having tremendous issues trying to get those cleared.
And I think for our audience, we'll go to break in a couple of minutes here, but for the last and the final third, we'll talk about some of the testing that's available throughout the world as well as coming into the United States. But the microclot testing is very new. There's only one location in the United States. There's a number in Europe and South Africa, but this is one of the examples of testing that was not available prior to 2020. Most of the standard testing that doctors are doing will obviously find some things, but not specific things like this. And this is what we're finding, not just with microclots, but with the spike protein, whether it's inside the serum, plasma, PBMCs, etc. So I think the key here would be keep an open mind as to what's going on and understanding that there are tests out there, or you should be looking for tests that may not necessarily be available through a standard mainstream channel, and always asking different questions with respect to exactly what's going on, because the landscape has significantly changed as such in the last 5 years. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay, I think we're going to go to break for Drew. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Thank you guys for this conversation. It's been great so far. I'm learning a ton. I feel like I spent so much time on the GoldCare platform watching classes and looking at our live materials. And I feel like I know everything. And then all of a sudden we have this conversation and I learn so much more. So thank you guys. I did want to ask, I want to point out a couple things. You mentioned that there are many products that do help with the spike protein, various protocols out there. It's not just Vedicinals, they're not the only one. We love them, we trust them. That's why we promote them. But you mentioned methylene blue and a few others. So I did want to make that clear to the audience that we're not here telling you there's just one option that you can do. We have a vetted, tried and true option that we love. And that is how you can, how we think you can best help combat spike protein. Someone in the chat who's watching right now, she asked a question, and I thought it was a good question. She's asking about how she can reduce impact of exposure. I did want to point out that she's a GoldCare member, and so Tina, a lot of the things you can do, you can go on the GoldCare platform, you can watch all these conversations, these exact things get talked about. You can also make an appointment with Dr. Perry to learn all about various options you have. So there's a lot of things you can do inside GoldCare to take care of that. But I figured if we had a minute or two before we kicked off the third section, maybe Dr. Perry or Chante, you could answer the question briefly on, just not being exposed to spike protein as much as possible.
What I usually tell individuals is I recommend a product that has xylitol in it. Xylitol is a natural occurring sugar that has antiviral and antibacterial properties. It's easily gotten off of the internet. And I typically follow a pulmonologist who's an expert in cough in Florida, and his whole family uses it. They take it before they get on a plane. They take it when they get off the plane. It's natural, and it keeps them from getting sick. So I think lessening the exposure to spike protein by limiting the viral infection is extremely important.
Agreed. And also in some cases, there are nasal sprays. So the virus enters our nasal passages and down the back of the throat once it gets into the respiratory system. So some people have turned to use an iodine. There are also other nasal sprays that Vedicinals makes and other nasal sprays on the market that help protect your mucosa. And that's the important thing, is coating that mucosa so the virus cannot get in so easily.
Yeah, xylitol is a nasal spray too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. If we could go to the foundational care for long COVID slide. And there we are. Dr. Perry.
Yeah, so we kind of want to turn our focus on, taking care of the things, making things better compared to what we've just heard about, and how to heal. And I want to encourage everyone that, as Drew said, we have an entire masterclass on long COVID, and that actually covers the basic things that we want every patient that we see to be working on before we even introduce any other recommendations. And that masterclass is an essential class to listen to. And we just highlighted the foundational care recommendations here. I won't go into detail, but I'll briefly read over those. But that masterclass does go into detail. So intermittent fasting, which increases autophagy, gets rid of those senescent cells that need to be getting rid of. Near infrared light targets the mitochondria. Sauna and sweating is a great way to detox. Melatonin is an excellent it micromanages the glymphatic system of the brain, which is the lymphatics of the brain. Resveratrol is important also for autophagy. If you can't do intermittent fasting, resveratrol might be a better option. It's also anti-inflammatory. That is also in the bundle of the Vedicinals we'll talk about. So if you get on the bundle, you won't need the resveratrol as a baseline. And then next slide. So obviously, we always talk about optimizing your microbiome. In long COVID, exercise needs to be very cautious with pacing, optimizing your vitamin D. And then Dr. Jana Schmidt, who's our naturopathic doctor, provides bee pollen, and she swears by it in regards to vitamins and minerals that come naturally from nature. So those are our foundational recommendations for all long COVID patients.
Very good. Can we have the next slide, please? So We've spent the last 5-6 years with a number of different doctors, scientists, laboratories around the world trying to figure out exactly how do we understand the core workings of the spike protein, where it's going, what it's doing, and therefore trying to figure out how to detox the body as such. So over the last 2.5, 3 years, we've moved into this protocol, which has 4 phases, and Chante will walk you through these phases, and you're going to see they're going to match up with some of the products and protocols that we already suggest. The key I would say here, though, is that we're learning just as much as everybody else all the time. And as Drew was saying, there's many different ways to attack this spike protein problem based upon where you are. So there'll be one of the 4 phases that you might be in, but there could also be other things. You may have got rid of the spike protein and you've got lingering effects from that. And there's going to be other things to think about with respect to what you should do next. And again, when you talk to Dr. Perry and Dr. Schmidt, they've got advice with respect to lots of different things, not just the spike protein removal, but also things that have occurred that you need to be aware of once the spike protein has actually been removed. So we'll let Chante go forward.
Yeah, so through our research and the different programs, we have been doing this for 6 years now. And what you find is that it's extremely important that you have to get these autophagy cycles back normalized, because that is the virus's first thing that it wants to do, is override autophagy. It does not want the cell to die, because if the cell dies, then it doesn't have a place to replicate. So you want your autophagy to be normalized and get those healthy cycles back going again. Then it's extremely important that you selectively break up the senescent cells that are harboring the virus and or spike proteins. That is going to be your best bet at getting rid of it the most, is removing the senescent cells. But you do not want to go through and remove too many too fast. So that's why it says selectively breaking up. That's done in a dose-dependent manner. And you can do synomorphics versus senolytics, and you need both approaches to keep the body nice and healthy and stable. Then you want to neutralize the liberated spike and virus with binders. You don't want to move it from one cell and then transfect another cell as you're doing the detox. So in our program, we also make sure the binders are in place so that we do not just move everything around to reinfect its neighbor cells. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you're blocking these host cell receptors and the fusion enzymes that are needed for the viral replication to take place. And you'll see in this next slide, as we've went through this last 6 years in developing different protocols and tackling different phases in someone's illness, that is exactly what we've done with this spike buster stack, we call it. And as I just described, the senescence that you see there, that is targeting those senescent cells. And we have carefully chosen the doses so that it is both synomorphic and senolytic. This all works in synergy, and they all need the other compound to work with it. There's not one star compound here. Sequestrol, as you see, that would be what we call a binder that most people are familiar with. The Vedicinals 9 liquid, that's our mother product, and that has 9 compounds in it that are both phytonutrients, flavonoids, and they were strictly ran through databases on 400 different pathways and points for antiviral activities. And it has done an amazing job synergistically to help with all of the problems that we're seeing in long COVID. The Neuralescence Night Spray, it was developed to help with the lymphatic system in the brain. A spike protein tends to override aquaporin 4. Therefore, your detox programs at night are not working and your brain gets inflamed. So the Neuralescence Spray aids and facilitates cleaning out the lymphatic system. And of course, during any detox, you need your omega supports to make sure that your new cells and fatty acids are available so that you can make new membranes and daughter cells appropriately.
Next slide, please.
So here is a different topic we're going to skip to, spike glycoprotein fragments. This was a beta test that we did with our Italian lab partners. And what we're looking at here, the spike proteins, this is a direct measure. So it's not an antibody, it's not indirect. This is a semi-quantitative spike protein test. You'll see participant 1 through 10 on the pre. What you're seeing there, where it starts with 44.5 and on down that column, that was before, and then the after, the column next to it, is where they ended up. ND means non-detectable, And that we did in an 8-week beta test. So what we wanted to do was place them on the products. We took a pre, which you see there. In 8 weeks, we repeated the blood test. And as you can see, all of them except for 2 were non-detectable. And in those 2 cases, one did not finish the program and the other one was late to the party. So they were a little bit behind on where their numbers should be. I want to bring a little bit of focus on where it says spike from vaccination before and after. As you all can see, they all show non-detectable. If they did have a vaccination signature, that would have shown up with a PP there. And that's a double proline insert that was used in vaccinations to help keep that signature staying around longer so that the body would have a chance to mount an immune response. What happened was in this case, they were all non-detectable. So we knew from there, although several of these people were sick and having difficult times, it was not in their case related to the vaccination. Otherwise, the double proline insert would have showed up and we would have been able to relate some of their problems to that. So once again, I want to really emphasize the fact that the natural infection alone is very dangerous. And each time that you get it, it is compounding. So I would like to bring some awareness to the fact that I think a lot of focus has been on the vaccination, but the wild infection itself is enough to give you severe outcomes.
And Dr. Perry, can you describe the participant GP in red, please?
Yeah, so I think that stands for Gayln Perry.
It does.
So I was part of one of the participant groups, and my quantitative spike protein antibody titer was 300. So I was like, I thought I was bulletproof. I did not get vaccinated. I'd had COVID twice, treated it promptly with ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, etc. So I was like, I'm going to enroll anyway because I want to see what happens. My direct quantitative spike was, look, you can see it's higher than anybody's. I was pretty floored. And I took the baseline product for 8 weeks and it came back non-detectable. So you can ask me, am I a believer? I am.
Yes.
Very good. And this is one sample set. We've done hundreds and hundreds of these in the United States, as well as many more throughout Europe. And this is continuing research in understanding exactly where the spike is and how long it persists. And there's a number of different methodologies now coming online in the United States to do this kind of testing. So pay attention to this, and your GoldCare team members will be able to help you as well. So if we go to the next slide, please.
So here is a different approach. In one of the research projects that we did, we worked very closely with Professor Koenig, and she made a test panel where we could test the exosomes, the PBMCs, and the serum. And the reason we wanted to look at that was because we wanted to look at the different compartments that spike proteins and or the virus were being found in. In this particular study case here, she was a 46-year-old female, and she had severe problems with post-vaccination symptoms. And she had underwent ionophoresis, and she also went through EBU. So all of the standard things that they were doing were not working. At that point, she decided that she wanted to enter into our research program and try the products to see if that would help her clear. And as you can see, she started out, hold on just a second, that number, the larger one, I think it's a
188.
188. Okay, so 188 picograms is where she started out. And as you can see, she ended up negative in serum, negative in PBMCs, and negative in exosomes. And that was a very, very short program. She ran 4 weeks, and then we retested her. So it did very good in not only clearing the circulating, but also in these very tiny compartments or organelles like exosomes, and also the immune cells in the PBMCs can become a host reservoir as well. So we were very, very pleased with this outcome. She's been doing much better and continues to do the program whenever she does get an infection now.
Okay, we can move on to the next slide, please. So this is a summary, and I'll hand it back to Chante in a second, but this is recapping much of what Dr. Perry was talking about with respect to microclots and understanding exactly how they're forming. And this is evidence of them formed, because these are blood tests done from a fluorescent microscopy, not actually in the United States. This was done in Germany and South Africa. But if Chante can give you an idea as to what you're looking at here.
Yeah, so this was another research case of ours. We wanted to see how effective we were at reducing microclot outcomes. And you'll see, so if you look left to right, each one of those columns represents a week. So this was over 8 weeks, and you can see as each week progresses, they got smaller and smaller and smaller until they return to normal size or within an acceptable limit. The score once again goes from 0 to 4, and most all of these outcomes return to normal. And you'll see here on the patients that we did, we had 61% of them that improved overall. And that was just with our mother product, the Vedicinals liquid only. This did not require a full bundle. So we were extremely happy about the microclot burden with being able to take the products over an 8 to 12 week course.
Perfect. Okay, I think the last slide, please. So this is the Vedicinals products, the suite of products. On the right-hand side, you're going to see the Spike Buster stack, which is actually all 5 together. And then the products are individually sold. Now, based upon Dr. Perry and Dr. Schmidt's advice, there's a number of ways in which you can combine these different products together, depending on what phase the individual is in, as well as many other products that they may be looking at that are well known to many people, NAC, ivermectin, etc., that may very well have a roles to play depending on the phase that the person is in with respect to what is called now long COVID. So we wanted just to make you aware that the GoldCare partnership is very strong, and we've actually got the products in the store. And we're very happy to continue working on the science with the doctors there. And what we are finding is that we are seeing changes all the time, weeks and months, and protocols will change and shift depending on the variations and depending on the immune foundation of the population. So it's not, unfortunately, going to be a cure, one pill cures all and off you go. This is going to be a challenge for quite a number of years. And the more educated you are, the more in touch you are with doctors like Dr. Perry and Dr. Schmidt, the better you're definitely going to have a better outcome as such.
I have a question for Chante right quick. Can you comment on the bioavailability excellence of the products?
Absolutely. So our V9 liquids is a very, very special liquid. It has to go through a engineered machine called an emulsion machine. It was designed specifically for this. As you all know, water and oils do not mix. And what we were able to overcome is being able to make this emulsion. We can take these polyphenols and these phytonutrients found in plants, and we can make them stabilize in a liquid. Therefore, it becomes extremely bioavailable to our bodies. And as you know, curcumin is very well known for not being absorbed easily. And we were able to overcome that. And in fact, a lot of our dosages had to be reduced by almost a third because it became so available that it was a little bit too strong. But yes, it's made very uniquely with an emulsion machine, and we were able to make this extremely bioavailable through that process.
Yep. That's key.
It is very special. Magic liquid.
And some people will complain about the taste. I did not,
yes.
But it's well tolerated, I think. So
yes, unfortunately, it's very hard to cover up turmeric and black pepper. We are working on that in the next phases, but for the amount of benefit that you gain, it's worth it. Just get it down.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you sharing all this with us.
Thank you all for having us. We sincerely appreciate it.
Back to Drew.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it. Thank you for joining us on tonight's GoldCare Medical Town Hall. Dr. Perry, Carl, Chante, excellent conversation. We look forward to many more of these. You can catch this conversation and all of our other COVID talks, vaccine talks on the GoldCare platform. That's goldcare.com/Dr. Gold. We'll give you 30 days free inside the platform. So come and join us. Come check us out. We'd love to show you what we're doing. We are very grateful and very thankful for all of you guys. There is a ton more to learn and a ton more to be said. So we'll see you on the next GoldCare Medical Town Hall. That's April 14th, where we are discussing insurance and continuing to uncover what GoldCare insurance is. See you next time.
Do you feel like the healthcare system is failing you? That's because it is, working exactly as intended to prioritize profits, bureaucracy, and big pharma, while leaving you and your family vulnerable when you need care the most. We understand your frustration. You've been asked to trust a system that feels rushed, impersonal, and biased. You deserve better. That's why we created GoldCare. Here, your values matter, your choices matter, and most importantly, you matter. GoldCare is more than a solution. It's a revolution. Trusted by over 10,000 members nationwide, we've built a system that puts your wellness first. With ethical, independent doctors who work for you, not the system, you'll have access to care that's transparent, trustworthy, and aligned with your values. We understand that stepping away from the familiar can feel daunting, but staying in a system that doesn't truly serve you is even harder. That's why GoldCare offers a healthcare alternative designed to work for you. Whether you're ready to step away from the system entirely or prefer to keep your insurance while seeking the transparent care, ethical doctors, and education you deserve, it's time to stop trusting a system that's failed you. Take control of your health with GoldCare. Join today for $17 a month and become part of a healthcare revolution. GoldCare, built for you, powered by freedom, trusted by thousands.